In today's video, we are going to be editing this incredible photo that was submitted by 2Z77. Thank you so much for sending this insane photo for me to edit. I'm going to teach you guys everything that I can about Lightroom and how to take this photo from this to this. So stick around and I will teach you everything I know. Let's go. Let's just dive right into it. You guys can see the settings that was shot here. The shutter speed was at 1/6 of a second, which is so slow, and to get a sharp, crispy photo like this, very impressive. Aperture of f/18 and an ISO of 100. First thing we always do when we get into Lightroom is we come down to the lens corrections and we click remove chromatic aberration and we click enable profile corrections. Now it looks like it doesn't have his lens in there, so I actually don't know what lens he's using here. So it's not going to give us any vignette correction or any of that stuff. That's okay, so we're just gonna go without. Then we're gonna head back up to the top, and if you need to crop your image, this is the part that I would do it, but it looks like somehow he just captured this image perfectly while rolling and hanging out of a car. So whoever this guy is, go follow him because he takes incredible photos. First thing we're gonna do, we're gonna make sure we get as much dynamic range from this photo as possible. So I'm gonna bring my highlights down, and we're going to bring our shadows up till we can see as many details in that car as we possibly can. We can add a ton of detail and contrast back into this in a lot of different ways. So here we go. We've got tons of detail in our car there. We're going to try and save a bit more of those highlights. That looks good to me. Then we're going to drag and hold option while we drag down our blacks to bring down contrast. Now this is a beautiful photo. I'm going to try to make it a bit more moody. So I'm going to come into the tone curve. I'm going to drag down the mid-tones here, try and make this look more like a beautiful sunset photo. So we're going to add a bit of cinematics. Let's see if we can continue to make the highlights pop there. So we're just going to keep the highlights up there, and let's see what we do here with the bottom half of the curve. We're trying to pick and choose where we want our shadows to be. So I think that looks pretty good there, and we might add a touch of a fade just so we can see into those darker areas there. So that looks pretty good to me. Now, one thing about this sky I'm seeing as we get down to the color mixer, I want to try and make this look more tealy, orangey rather than that yellow. So we're going to start pulling our oranges and maybe our yellows to make that sky look like a more beautiful sunset, a bit more cinematic. So we're going to pull the yellows over, the oranges a little bit, and we want to make sure that the tail lights on this are still popping. So they look great. Let's see what we can do with the luminance. Yeah, that looks pretty good there. So that's a pretty good start. I'm not going to fiddle too much more with the colors. Now, I encourage you guys, I've done a couple of these videos, go back and watch them. I do have stackable presets. We're not talking about my presets. You can buy them if you want to support the channel. But for this one, I'm going to bring my cool tones into the shadows. And you can see in the color grading, the way that I set that up is in my shadows. I put 220 in the hue, 10 in the saturation. We don't do anything to the midtones. We just pop the luminance a little bit because that brings out a bit more details in the car area there. So I just pop that a little. And in the highlights, I add 35 is the color that I choose in the hue. And then I add a saturation of 10. And if I bump that up, you can see what that does is it really warms up the image. So we're just going to keep that back at 10 for now. Now, because this is sunset, I don't know if I want to pull this up to the right or down to the left with the balance. I do like seeing the road kind of be blue, and then we can do some things with our masking to the sky to help that pop out. For our sharpening here, because this is a TIFF, not a raw image, we are going to add a bit of sharpening. And then in our masking, we're going to drag that up, hold option, drag this to the right so that we're sharpening just the car, maybe some of the lines on the road. But if everything's being sharpened, if you hold this and you keep it to the left, you can see that that's all being sharpened and it's adding noise essentially to your image. So we're going to drag this to the right and make sure that we are sharpening just the details that we want to see. So I think that looks good to me there. You could add grain if you want. I might add a little bit to make it look a little bit more edgy, less digitized, that kind of thing. And possibly if we go down to our calibration in the blue primary, if you drag that hue to the left, this is really what's going to give you that like teal orange look. I don't think it looks good this far over, but we can maybe add a little bit of that to the left and then bring up the saturation there. So the colors are looking really good to me here. Looks really cinematic from where we started. And now we're gonna go into our masking, which you know is the most important thing. Now, before we get into the masking portion of this, I just wanna thank one of the sponsors of the channel, One Bone Brand, for this swag, for giving me this hoodie and a few other shirts. They make clothing for guys that have like a little bit more love on their handles. I don't fit the demographic of all the models you see on Instagram. So they make clothing that makes me look good and feel good. So I really appreciate them supporting the channel. I will leave links down below for you guys to go check out their brands. If you're like me and don't fit the model people of the world, One Bone makes clothes for you and me. So I love them. I highly recommend them. I purchased them first, reached out to them, and they were open to sponsoring me and this channel. So go check them out. I'll leave links down below. There is a discount code down there for you guys as well. Thank you, One Bone, for being a supporter of this channel. Now let's finish editing this photo. First and foremost, we're going to add a graduated mask from the bottom all the way up to the car here. And then we're going to reduce the exposure. So if you've watched any of my videos before, this is a really critical step in order to draw our eyes' attention to the car here. So that's the first step we're gonna do. You can do this to taste, but I encourage you not to overcook this one, because then it looks too intentional, if that makes sense, or unrealistic. So just do this to taste. I often use the navigator up top, and because I'm not able to use or remove the lens profile corrections, I am seeing quite a bit of vignetting up in the top corners here. And then when you add this, and there is like weird lens distortions, it really will accentuate that in the corners, which you can kind of see in this image. So we're not going to try and overdo this. So we're going to bring that back a little bit. Now we're going to do the same thing with the top. I'm going to add another graduated mask, hitting M, drag it down from the top, and we're going to reduce exposure there as well, just a little bit, continuing to bring our eye to the car. The next thing we're going to do, create a mask that for our subject here. And Lightroom does a great job of capturing that. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna add exposure a little bit. We're still gonna bring up more details in the shadows, because look at all the details in this car. It's absolutely insane, absolutely beautiful. Pop the whites a little and then bring the blacks down just to make sure it sits in a little bit more naturally again still. And let's look at what that's doing here. Boom, that really helps the car stand out. I'm gonna add just contrast in there, because I think you don't want the car to stand out unnaturally, and contrast or adding blacks really helps it sit more naturally in the photo. So there it is. That looks pretty good to me. We're gonna add one more mask here, because I don't love the way that these clouds look here. We can clearly see that there's sun coming and interjecting from that side. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit Shift M. We're gonna create a new mask, and if you hit Shift M, you can see the quick buttons there. Shift M is gonna give us a radial gradient. I'm gonna drag this over here, and we're essentially gonna create a artificial sun. So the way I want to do that is I'm going to drag up on the exposure, up on the warmth, and then if you come down to the dehaze, we're going to bring the dehaze down so it kind of softens that. Instead of being harsh and gross like that, we're going to soften it and it becomes more misty. So you can see that's what it's doing there, and I think that looks pretty good. Here's a before and after. So I'm actually going to add one more linear gradient. We're going to drag it from the sun's direction. We're going to add a touch of exposure like this, warm it up, and there we go. Now we've got some really cool light hitting coming in from the side there. Now the last thing I would do is add a brush, add a touch of exposure, a little bit of contrast, and then just look at all the beautiful details on Lamborghini. I don't know if any company really does it like they do, but I would just brush over some of these details in the darker areas just to make this look really professional. You can pull out all these crazy details and make sure that our eyes are drawn to these things. So go through and pick out the details that you want to make sure that they're really standing out and not falling into the shadowy areas. Do this tastefully. You have to be really careful, especially in Lightroom when you add a brush, that it doesn't add like this weird hazy misty thing to the edges. Photoshop does this much better, and I do have videos on how I use Photoshop for this, so go check those out if you want. But for now, I think this is a pretty wicked edit, start to finish. We did it really quick. I might adjust some of the saturation here. I might if you add saturation, like, come on, it pops, it looks great. But I kind of like this muted tone here. I think it looks so dope. Finishing it off strong, I would go into the color balance, maybe add a bit more blues. Oh, I don't know. And then do we just finish with a touch of contrast and just make it all pop? There we go. Contrast and saturation tend to be the last things I do, but that is an absolutely banging photo. Thank you so much for submitting this. Make sure to go check out 2Z77 on Instagram. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned a little bit of something on how to edit in Lightroom. Thank you guys for spending time with me. I hope that you feel like you've learned something. If you did, smash that like button, comment down below maybe what you would have done differently. And I hope I will see you guys in the next video. If you want to support the channel, go click the links down below in the description. I do have presets that I've built just for you guys, for automotive specifically. But with all of that said, thank you guys so much for your time. I do hope I'll see you guys in the next video.